curious, you mentioned technology and AI briefly earlier. Are you concerned about the impact it might have on people? Like, because now we're becoming increasingly reliant on AI. And in addition to that, we're living in times where it's just busier, it's noisier, there's more distractions. So are you concerned about the impact it might have on people's originality and their ability to think outside the box?
Yes. Well,
Because all the geniuses you wrote about in the book lived in different times. It was quieter. They had just more time, more space. The rhythm of life was different. So what are your thoughts on that?
I love the question, and I have lots of thoughts. So, the classic Dickens lines, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. This is always true. That's why that's a classic, a genius classic work, is the best of times or the worst of times. So the worst of times would be if all the scenarios that people are all too familiar with about what could go wrong. The best of times is you can get access to any information, any knowledge, anywhere, instantaneously and for free. And that is amazing. I mean, I've been asking AI questions and having these amazing conversations, like having a super smart friend I can have a dialogue with. And I have lots of real super smart friends, and now I have one on my device. And I was concerned about the net effect of it on humanity.
Yeah.
But then just a few weeks ago, I happened to be at this event. There's a beautiful place called Tibet House in New York City. It's one of the places where His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he's connected to the Tibet House, and there's a place called Menla up in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
They have various retreats and meditations and so on. So I've been there over the years plenty of times. But this was a really interesting event that I attended. Actually, this young man, when he was in high school, he read How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And it inspired him, and he started this amazing company that does kind of AI service around the world. And this guy's a genius. And so I was at Tibet House because he was announcing the launch of this huge project where they were going to use AI to translate all of the sacred texts of ancient Tibet. So this is just a massive, massive undertaking that would have cost hundreds of millions of dollars and taking hundreds of years, except AI can probably do it for $20 million and maybe finish it in a year or two. It's so incredible that we're going to have access to this priceless knowledge rapidly through this technology. But the best part of the whole event for me was, have you heard of Robert Thurman?
Yes, I actually had him on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, well, that figures. So most people know him because he's Uma Thurman's father.
Yes. He was a delight to talk to.
He's so cool, right? So he's one of the great scholars of Tibetan Buddhism in the world. Mm-hmm. And so he addressed our group. And he talked about the deity Manjushri, who is the deity of unlimited universal divine intelligence. And someone had asked him the same question you asked me, are we worried about this? He said, he sees AI as an expression of Manjushri, that intelligence is coming forth at a level that's seemingly beyond anything we've ever been able to access directly before. So he's optimistic because Manjushri is a very positive deity. So that's my take.
How interesting. Yeah. So it is a manifestation of something bigger, something that can actually assist us in excavating our genius.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just concerned about shorter attention spans and how people sort of prefer bite-sized content as opposed to long-form content. I've noticed that as a content creator, that is something that is kind of drilled into us now. Like long-form content, like try to stay away from that because that will probably not get you as many eyeballs as snippets of
here's the difference.
information. So that's why I was wondering,
Yes.
like, what would be the consequences of that?
Great point. So the danger is to confuse short-term content. I mean, I know there's a whole business model and everything that you could just make a living with tons of useless short-term content that really doesn't do anything, just grabs the eyeballs, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I see how do we grab eyeballs, short-term content, to lead you towards doing the real depth of inner work and transformation, which is not going to happen on Instagram. So in other words, and I mean, I don't know, I haven't solved that, but that's my question is, I'm not just giving everything up to I'm going to do everything I do in sound bites from now on, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I have, a social media guy. He just sent me a thing this morning on the latest strategy, but the aim is to get you to go to my 5-day seminar.
Yes.
First, if we can get you for 3 seconds, and then you might watch the 30-second thing, and then it's only a 3-minute read of your
even with blogging
life.
Yeah, even with blogging, like they kind of dissuade you from writing long form content because they're like, people don't have the time or the will to scroll through all that information.
Well, the truth is they do have the time.
Okay.
What they don't have is the self-awareness. What they don't have, so the irony of this is a lot of what I'm teaching now are inner practices for regulating your nervous system and aligning your spirit, your mind, your emotions, and your body so that you can be a whole, healthy, happy, and fulfilled person. So, I teach Qigong. I'm doing a 5-day retreat at the Omega Institute the first week of June. Then I'm doing a retreat June 6th and 8th. Master Robert Peng and I are teaching a weekend retreat to elevate your baseline of life energy. This is all at the Omega Institute in upstate New York. And then later in the summer, I'm teaching a 5-day retreat called Walking Well, where we're going to walk in nature every day.
You wrote a book about that as well, right?
Yes, that's my most recent book. It's called
Your most recent
Well.
book. Yeah.
Yes, because no amount of blips and quick scrolls are going to give you what you get if you walk for an hour in the woods. So I just want to use all this stuff to get you to walk for an hour in the woods because it'll do more for you than almost anything else you can do for yourself. And I can explain to you scientifically, spiritually, emotionally, physically why it's so good for you. But first I have to get your eyeball for 3 seconds. And then maybe you'll come to Omega, we'll walk for a week and your life will be transformed. So that is a conundrum. It's a legitimate conundrum. And yes, of course, many people are getting more superficial and they are suffering as a result of it. But when people are suffering, they'll start to seek answers. And maybe, I think ultimately they'll say, gee, maybe being on my phone all the time and constantly scrolling on Instagram is not going to be the path to the life that I really want.
So your prescription is returning to the body, finding some practice where you can get grounded. Because, as we know, the mind and body are connected, right?
They're not just connected, they can't separate them.
Yeah, you can't separate them. Yeah.
Right? So the somatic.
This is
the corporalitas, the sixth principle for thinking like Leonardo. So check this out. So, so I'm writing the book, Walking Well. And I just got this idea. I knew Leonardo da Vinci loved to walk. I knew it was his favorite exercise. It turns out it's the favorite exercise of most of history's greatest geniuses.
Yeah, Steve Jobs, I believe. He used to walk a lot around.
It's hard to find an example of a genius who didn't like to walk.
Yeah.
So I start studying Leonardo and what he wrote about walking, and turns out he invented the pedometer. He invented the device for measuring how far you're walking.
Wow.
How cool is that? So, yeah, if you think it like in a way, walking well is an extension of the corporalita chapter of How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci.
Hmm. I wanted to touch on something that I read in your book, in one of your books, and it struck me as really profound. I'm actually going to read it because I have the excerpt here. You read that every great breakthrough is a result of complex weaving of influences, effort, and serendipity. The most advanced, creative, and original thinking is always a product of historical context and the influences of the mind of the originator. So I'd love for you to expand on that.
Sure. That's from Discover Your Genius.
Yes,
Uh,
discover your
and
genius.
yeah. So, and that's where I'm see, there's a common notion today that sort of denigrates the individual and looks at everything in the context of the collective. And I think it's really important to look at the collective without disregarding the power of the individual. In other words, both are really important. So I was writing that to acknowledge the context, the collective, and the effect that has on a given individual. And yet, the people I put in that book were people whose individual unique contribution was so extraordinary that they deserve to be recognized, from my point of view. So, obviously, context and timing and framework. I mean, maybe the greatest example of that is the invention of calculus. So most people say, "Wow, calculus was really hard," when I went to high school or college.
Yeah,
Well, if you think
made
it's
my
hard to
life
do,
miserable.
right? Well, I think I made my calculus teacher's life miserable, but that's another story. But it's one thing to say, okay, wow, something to be good at calculus. How about inventing it? How about inventing calculus because the mathematics that exists at the time does not allow you to work on the kind of problems you need to work on. Now, what if two people invented calculus basically at the same time in different parts of the world, working on different problems? You might say, wow, it was time in human history for calculus to be invented. And fortunately, Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz showed up just at that time and invented it for us. So what it suggests is that, I like Elizabeth Gilbert talks about, she says there's an idea sphere. So these
Yes.
ideas that just floating
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
And every
It's
human,
from
I
her
like to
book,
do
Big
every
Magic,
human
right?
being, right, yeah. Every human being is like an antenna. But your antenna yours does, but most people's antenna doesn't get good reception because there's all sorts of static because they're watching commercials about junk food and other, they're clicking on all sorts of clickbait. So that's static in your antenna. So what you want to do is go for a walk in nature, clear the static out of your antenna, and then tune in and keep a little notebook and write down what you get. That's what Leonardo said to do. That's what Edison said to do. That's what Marie. So these are practical things that all of us can do. And then we discover our own genius. And that genius might be in the context of what's happening in our family, in our community, in our company, in our country, or for the whole world.